All right, guys, welcome back to our YouTube channel. We are in a bit of a different atmosphere today. We are going to be doing a live voiceover clip of our glute and hamstring workout. We have not done one of these before, so you guys will have to let us know, give us feedback on like what the sound is like, if you guys like videos like this. But I have Madison here with me. You guys have, if you've watched our YouTube channel, we have interviewed her a few times. Madison does have like a very specific focus in mobility. You're a mobility specialist, right?
Yes.
Okay. So we're gonna go through this workout. As most of you know, I am a competitor, so I am typically training for a very aesthetic purpose. And that doesn't always come with the most functional of form or functional of movements, because I am in some areas trying to atrophy certain areas that you typically wouldn't want to atrophy for just like general health. So Madison's gonna come in, kind of give her perspective on a movement. I'm gonna give mine. We're gonna kind of like learn from each other and just have a little bit of fun.
What do you call this? I don't.
Glute ham slide.
Okay, I call it just like the roller hamstring curl. So what's cool about this is we're loading your hamstrings with max hip extension. So you really need to focus on that max hip extension, not back extension, hip extension. So a big thing Danielle's gonna do first is make sure her low back is pressing down into the ground. So there's almost like a good connection between her hip and her rib.
And it's almost like you're kind of bringing that pelvis into like a pelvic tilt, right?
In a way, yes. So it's just like a nice neutral spine. And then as she digs her heels down into that slider, her hips should extend off the ground as she curls in. And you notice that her pelvis is not rotating at all. She's keeping that tuck, her glutes are on fire. Yep, and then she's gonna straighten back out. If this is new, it helps to like go down and reset every time just to really make sure you have a good grab on those glutes and hamstrings. The next thing I'd focus on is keeping your toes straight up and down. If the target is to get the back of your hamstrings, you need your toes to be straight up and down. If you're rotating your toes out, that load is gonna migrate to the outside of your leg, maybe even like your quadriceps. So keeping those toes straight up and down is also super helpful here. Other details when you're doing this. Don't mind me, last set, I'm dying right now. But hands down versus up. I like to roll up. It helps roll your shoulder blades back and down. Again, like helping promote anatomical position while you're doing this. Like it's an easy tendency to want to crunch to help keep your core engaged while you go through this. But then you think of real life when you're standing tall. Are you going to be able to keep your core engaged? Probably not, because you don't train like that. So it's important to find like good posture through your chest and your arms. And then from there, try to find midline. A lot harder, but more relevant to real life. Then you come up, pull in, come out, down, dig down in the roller, and only go as high up as you can without that weight shifting to your head. And then you pull it in, push it out, down. So as I'm doing this, I'm digging my heels like I'm trying to break through the floor the whole time. Oh my goodness.
Okay, so the next move we are going to do is going to be glute focused hyperextensions. So most of you may know this as like a back extension machine, but we are gonna use it specifically for the glutes, and in my training, specifically for those upper glutes. So you want that shelf, because I think a lot of people too, when they say I wanna grow my glutes, they're really focused on like the lower glute, but to really get that like bubble look, you gotta train the upper and the outer.
This is a really, really good one in like a substitution for like a dumbbell RDL, a deadlift or anything like that, because you can do it body weight and it takes a lot of tension off the spine. So it's a way to load the glutes and hamstrings without putting any compression on the discus of the spine. And I found it really helpful for people just to learn how to RDL and get those muscles going.
And then adding, I like just for this one specifically, because this pad is so long, I like putting this foam roller behind my feet so I can still get my feet a little bit higher and not lock it out at the bottom and put a lot of strain. But if it doesn't have that foam roller, I just don't feel super stable. I feel like my feet are gonna slip. So that's why you're gonna see the foam roller. I've seen you use like the yoga pads as well with your clients.
I think it just depends
how thick you need it, yeah.
Grab it. I'll grab it. Okay, so now she's doing the loaded set, but you can see, like we talked about earlier, this roller helps line her up so her whole thigh is on that pad and she can drive, where before like only like her pocket up was really pressing. And again, that would stimulate maybe a little cheating and using the low back to get up. So that just gives a good firm contact. And you can see she's almost crunching her core as she comes up. to really avoid any extension of those back erectors. Nice.
Oh, I already feel like the workout should be over. And there's different ways that you can add load to this exercise. This is just one of them. You could hold a plate. You could also add a band. So having the band around these and putting it kind of around that upper back, or even just holding it in front. So finding what way, and honestly, if you do enough time under tension, kind of like Madison was having me slow down that contraction, you don't even need to weight this exercise.
No. Good, so that's something you can't really see happening. But Danielle's thinking of like screwing her feet into the platform, especially with trying to get the outer glute area. That screwing aspect will really help get in there and create a lot of tension in that hip joint. This can be used for a hip thrust, which Susie and I talked about last week. It can be used on an RDL, even a single leg RDL. You want to think of that femur externally rotating as you go through this motion.
Corkscrew is like the exact description I use for my clients. All right, as you can probably guess, the next thing we are going to do is a hip thrust, and definitely a staple in a glute and hamstring workout for me, because it definitely does work both. So we are doing it, if you guys have trained here, we do have a glute. We have a hip thrust machine, but we are going to be doing a barbell hip thrust. I do think that, like, personally, nothing's gonna beat a barbell hip thrust, because you can adapt the length to fit, again, your biomechanics, where on a machine, it's very set. So it's not gonna be perfect for everyone. It is nice, because you don't have to set it up, but this is a great way if you are training here, because we do not have a specific area for hip thrust. This is a great way to set it up using these rogue boxes. Barbell, we do have a shorter barbell as well for hip thrust that I'll use sometimes, but this is just the standard squat barbell. And again, you'll see us adjusting the height of this, because Madison is taller, I am shorter, so we're adjusting it based on our bodies and what feels right.
And another thing to add with this setup, all the things she said I completely agree with. Another benefit to using a barbell versus a machine that's like on a guide is you're required to make sure this bar stays level, which doesn't seem like much of a thing, but just that lateral stability asks a lot more of all the muscles involved, in turn giving you more muscle gains. So. And more like nervous system connection and things like that.
And again, I think a lot of people will want to use the machine, because again, they don't have to use that stability, and they can go heavier on the machine, whereas this one kind of checks your ego a little bit and makes you really work all of those muscles.
All right, so Danielle's about to take off. You can see her foot position has her heels right under her knees. With this, she's gonna have a lot of focus on the hip extension, a lot of load on those glutes. If she walked her feet out a little further, so they were extended from her knees, she'd get a lot more hamstring involved. Granted, she's still getting a lot of hamstring in this movement, but getting more glute out of it for this situation. Again, if she walked those feet out a little further, it would be a lot of hamstring action. You can also see bar placement on the hips. You can see the peak of her glute and the bar are in line with each other. So if you're ever questioning if it should be like more on your thigh, more on your pelvis, like find the peak of your glutes and put the bar directly above that. Keeping a nice straight spine. Oh yeah, solid.
So the biggest tip I like to do in glute movements is talk about a pelvic tuck versus a pelvic thrust. So do you want to do a pelvic thrust?
So like the bad way?
Yeah.
So people think like get high, get more.
Yeah. And that's all in your low back. Her glutes are completely turned off at that point.
So here.
Yep, there's that tuck.
Glutes already, and push through the floor, and only go as high as you can go without losing that.
Yep.
So right about there.
So keeping it, and again, that's gonna vary for everyone. Everyone's range of motion is going to be different. And as you can see too, her whole body's moving. She's not breaking at that rib cage. Yep. She's like a pendulum. Yeah. All right, I'm gonna add some weight.
Maybe I should talk about this.
And not driving through your back?
Yes. Okay, so Danielle thinks I can handle the same weight. I cannot in like a hypertrophy focus, but I can in maybe like a power strength focus. So what I'm gonna be doing differently is setting the bar down between each rep, not holding at the top, so the tempo will be up, down, pause, up, down, pause. This will make sure that I get up by driving my feet down into the ground, and that rest will allow a little bit of like rest for the spinal cord, so that endurance doesn't have to be as long. Like her endurance is so high because she trains hypertrophy, and that's amazing. Me, like I couldn't support and keep my midline brace for that long without like resting at the bottom. So we'll kind of show what that's about.
And I think this is just another great example of adapting your training based on your goals, A, and B, what your body is capable of. Because I think a lot of people too, they do think about, this is something that Dom has taught me, they think about going through that full range of motion on a hip thrust and coming all the way down. And sometimes if you have a shorter glute muscle, that's taking it way past your range of motion, and that's when people let it go into that lower back. But because Madison is a taller individual and we're on that shorter box, she is able to go all the way down without extending through that low back to get to the bottom of the range of motion. You got this. Power through those heels. You're fine. Yes. Nice. Brace. And you'll notice every time before she goes up, she is taking that big brace into that core, which that big brace in that core is going to take any of that pressure off that low back to get that bar off the ground. Good core brace. Nice. Easy. That's why you get the big
Like,
jiggle. Next, we are going to move on to a barbell RDL, so Romanian deadlift. You can do this on a lot of different setups in the gym. Again, the barbell is gonna be like Madison pointed out. It's gonna bring on those stabilizers and kind of engage those as well. I like barbell. I just feel more in control with a barbell. You can do dumbbells. You can do it on the T-bar row. I've done it here. Where else do you do it with? Yeah, low cable pull-throughs. Again, it's just another alternative to similar to those hyperextensions. You're just getting that good stretch in your hamstrings. And the biggest thing with RDLs is you're not using your back to come up. You're getting that stretch and corkscrewing those feet and pulling those glutes underneath. And I think one of the biggest mistakes I see is people coming all the way through too far, going into that low back. So making sure we're coming down, and you only have to come down like right below those knees till you feel that stretch. I also see people go down way too far. They lose that contraction in their lats, yes. and then they come up, and then they come back too far. And
Yes, hook them to the elbow. Perfect.
The equipment is in added hook, but not in the system.
Correct. Yes. Absolutely. And this is pretty heavy weight, to be honest. Like, the grip will help her handle this weight. Like, there gets a point where your hamstrings obviously are going to develop faster than your hand strength can handle, and that's where you can use some grips here. It's also going to help her keep her lats engaged a lot better too, because her hands aren't like slipping, so she can still keep like a firm grip on the bar and keep those lats fired up. So again, you can see she's only pushing back as far as she can, not reaching down. She's thinking of sending those hips back. You can see she's almost like hitting a wall at the top, so she doesn't end up overextending, pushing through those heels. Good.
nice. You can also even see her toes kind of like coming up a little bit as she sits back into her heels. Just shows how much she's putting that weight into that posterior chain. Microphone close to my face so they can hear my screams.
So I took over for the last thing we're doing, so we could have done instead, I think it was like some straight leg abductions on the cable.
No, it was, we were gonna do cable hip abduction, so just straight out to the side, and then superset it with Smith machine hyperextension, so where we're on and we're pushing that Smith machine up.
Right, okay, so we're kind of combining like a straight hip extension and abduction into one exercise here. These are called prone alternating straddle runners. You can do these bilaterally as well. We're doing single leg just to help ring out each leg. A lot of people are a little uneven with their muscle groups, like side to side. So we're gonna try to keep it even here. So you can see Danielle driving her pelvis down into the box. and she's trying to find that outermost range of motion of her hip. So she's not just trying to extend super high through that hip, she is finding the widest that femur can go relative to her hip joint and then extending it as long as she can. So she's almost thinking of pushing towards my hand, up and out, and driving through the heel. Just like all of our other lifts, she's pushing through that heel. So think of a little push down. That's it.
Yeah, so a big thing when I'm doing it is just like, and it's kind of like we brought it up on the hip thrust machine, you want to think about tucking that pelvis into this bench. So really kind of thinking about bringing that pelvis into neutral. So many of us walk around with that anterior pelvic tilt, and we let that remain in our exercises, and that's when you start to feel that lower back pain, because you're letting those hips come back and all that stress is going into that low back. So when you're tucking that pelvis into neutral, it's in turn taking all of that tension off that low back.
Yes, exactly.
All right, last set. Okay, so I'm gonna do 8 each side and then a static hold on
Yes,
both.
8 each side, and then she's gonna just bilaterally extend out only as far as she can to maintain like a good feeling in the glute. And she's just gonna kind of hold it to failure just because it's her last thing of the day. I think that's all she wrote.
Yeah, my glutes are done. She did. Well, she did have some calf raises, but I'll do those later. But thank you guys for joining. If you guys like this type of workout, definitely let us know and we can do more. If you have any specific questions about the exercises we did, leave them down below and Madison and I will get back to answering those questions. And if you guys have any, sorry, I'm still trying to catch my breath, requests for the next video, definitely let us know and we will see you guys in the next one.